white privilege? Frances E. Kendall, author of Diversity in the Classroom and Understanding White Privilege, comes close to giving us an encompassing definition of white privilege. Having a greater access to power and resources than people of color in the same situation do. In Peggy McIntosh's famous essay, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, she explains white privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets that I can count on cashing in each day. A few examples of white privilege might be: 1. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I'm shown that people of my color made it what it is. 2. I can do well in challenging situations without being called a credit to my race. And finally, 3. I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having co-workers on the job suspect that I got it because of my race. White privilege can be one of the most difficult concepts for white Americans to unpack. For many white people, it ignites feeling of just defensiveness and in some guilt. It is often one of the hardest conversations to have because in order to understand white privilege, one must consider the interconnectedness of identity and experiences, also known as intersectionality. For example, some of Peggy McIntosh's examples of white privilege are also directly connected to social class. Please listen as Raven Cole explains her experience with white privilege.
So the first time that I heard the phrase white privilege, I was a young woman that had just escaped an abusive home. I was living way below the poverty line and struggling just to feed myself. I was also dealing with a health disorder called endometriosis that was causing me to miss massive amounts of school and deal with pain every single day. I just couldn't understand how I had privilege when I was struggling to survive. So the fact of the matter is that my dismissive attitude of white privilege was because I did not understand what white privilege actually looks like. It is not a denial of my experiences or struggle. It is simply means that my skin color isn't one of the things that is causing that struggle. So I was really defensive about talking about race and privilege because I was so used to my skin color just kind of being the center of the universe and never causing any problems for me. I didn't understand what we now call the power of normal. So here is a great example of the power of normal as an educator. So as an English teacher, I am often asked for book recommendations from my students and parents. So my first year teaching, I started creating lists of books for students based on different genres. Once I handed a list to a student and she scanned it and she looked so grateful, and then she asked, "So are any of these books about Black girls?" And y'all, this question just broke my brain. The truth was literally none of the titles on the list had Black main characters. I simply hadn't thought about race as I created these lists. I'd never had to think about race. I was so used to the characters looking and talking like me and me feeling inspired and getting the story that I never thought about what it might mean to a person of color who is rarely the main character, and even your favorite teacher can't recommend such a book to you. So having media that represents you is absolutely a privilege, and white characters and stories are such a default setting, so normal in our society, that as white people, we don't really have to think about it, and that's privilege. So white privilege also shows up as legal and systematic advantages. So racial bias pervades the criminal justice system, and it affects sentencing of crimes even when two people of different races commit the same crime. For example, Brock Allen Turner, a white Stanford University student, was arrested in 2015 after he was witnessed sexually assaulting an unconscious girl behind a dumpster. From the beginning, Brock Turner's racial and socioeconomic privilege changed his case. Media coverage of the case featured a smiling yearbook photo of Turner, not a mugshot. This is because police refused to release his mugshot until almost 5 months after the case blew up in the media. And his booking photo was not released until almost 16 months after the arrest. This positive imagery of a convicted rapist was unusual, especially when we consider how his case actually ended. Despite witnesses and victim testimony, he was sentenced to 6 months in jail and was released after only 3 months. At Turner's sentencing, the judge spoke on the potential severe effect that prison would have on Turner's life. In comparison, people of color very rarely see this type of lenient sentencing and positive media coverage when being charged with a crime.
White privilege may also be seen in the home buying process. In the Keep Out investigation in 2018, it was found that Black, Latinx, and Asian homebuyers are denied loans at a higher rate than whites in U.S. cities. In a study in 2017, Harvard University found that people of color are more likely to report racial discrimination when trying to rent or buy housing. White privilege may also be seen in encounters with police. According to the Police Policy Initiative, police are twice as likely to use force towards people of color. As we have said, privilege can be uncomfortable to discuss and identify. That being said, we have to make sure that we don't use discomfort as an excuse to disengage, and instead use our discomfort to find ways to eliminate bias, racism, and discrimination.